WVTC Radio Detroit. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, our website, www.wvtcradio.com, or download our WVTC app from the Play Store for Android users and the App Store for iPhone users. Thank you for tuning to WVTC Radio Detroit and the Community Bell Show with your host, former Wayne County Commissioner, Edna Bell. Stay tuned for insightful information Detroiters will find valuable. Text a friend and tell them to watch with you for news you can use. And now, your host, Edna Bell.
Hello, everyone. It is Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock, so it must be the Community Bell Show. Welcome again to the Community Bell Show. We are always excited to have you with us. And so please just be able to be with you on a Monday afternoon. It isn't sunny. There might be a few snowflakes out there, but there's no snowstorm. So that's good news. And so we're happy to be with you this wonderful Monday afternoon on the Community Bell Show. We were not with you last Monday because we were in Washington, D.C. last Monday with my daughter, Wayne County Chair Commissioner Alicia Bell, who had been invited to the White House for the president's African American history reception. And so we were excited to be in Washington, D.C. She was among many of the dignitaries that were there on that Monday at the White House with the president and the vice president and uh, plenty of Congress people and other folks from around the nation. And so we were excited to be there. So she had a marvelous time. I think she might have posted some photos and videos on Facebook, but it was just a pleasure and an honor to have been invited to the White House to that African American history celebration at the White House by President Joe Biden. Well, we have a marvelous guest with us today. And a young man I've known for, a long time, since he was a very young man. How's that? And he has just been a blessing to this entire community. And I am so pleased to just say that I know him and have known him for a long time. His name is George Davis. I've known George since he was young and I was younger, but he's still young, and I'm going to claim to be not as old, but as younger than I was. How's that? George, welcome to the Community Bell Show.
Hey there. Hey there. I hope all is well with you. So glad to be here.
All is well. Yes. Now, George has had several different careers, but the ones I want to concentrate on today, first of all, I want to talk about his base, his church family, Ebenezer, West Chicago and Grand River. Talk about where you grew up in church, George.
Yes, I'm a lifelong member of the historic Ebenezer African Methodist Episcopal Church, located at 5151 West Chicago Boulevard. My pastor is the Reverend Dr. McCarl D. Thomas Sr., and I have been a member there since 1972 when my family moved here from Ohio. I was a little kid about 4 or 5 years old then, and stayed with the ME Church all of my life. And so it's a great church. It's 150 years old.
Wow.
And last year, and we've had a great celebration through that time. And there's nothing like being rooted in the Word of God through your years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's what this whole station is about. Being rooted in the Word of God. And for those of you who don't know, WVTC stands for Winning Victories Through Christ.
Amen.
And that's what we try to do every time when we bring you information, because information is power. And the information that we bring you, we try to make sure that it's something that's going to help improve your lives and the lives of those people that are around you and your family members. So thank you, George, for that. The second place I know George is from the Optimist Club. George was one of the original members of the Young Optimist Club of Detroit, probably one of the only one in the country, as I think, and surely the only one in Detroit. And I have challenged George and his other founding members to reach back and start another Young Optimist Club, because those young people that were part of that Optimist Club have been so successful. They are in all sorts of fields. And when they go into a field, they just rise to the top, and they have all been so very, very successful. So, George, I'm saying it again. I will say it to some of your other cohorts. We've got a Chief Judge of the 36th District Court, Bill McConicle. We've got the Chair of the Wayne County Board of Commissioners, Alicia Bell. We've got Sonia Bell Johnson, social worker extraordinaire who works with Detroit Public School Systems and trying to keep kids in school and get their attendance right. We've got people all over the place who were part of that Optimist Club. And so your job, go start another one with young people and get them going on the same path you guys went on.
Yes, indeed. And I also, one of the other hats that I wear is I'm the president of the Michigan League of Conservation Voters, literally the organization that focuses on the environment statewide for making sure that people can vote on the environment. And the great portion of that is that we reach into so many communities. And what I gain from my experience in the Optimist Club and bring to this board is the idea that voting is important. Everyone has to be registered. Everyone has to get out there and vote. And so I work with young people in that vein, and I tell them of my time with the Optimist Club and where I was trained, learned, I listened, I heard. My peers were the ones who set the table for the rise of Detroit in many ways from the 70s and 80s of challenges of deindustrialization. And I could not have asked for a better training ground. When I walk into a place and I see some folks, like, oh yeah, there's my buddy. We've known each other 30 years. I see a lady who's in charge of something. Oh, there she is. We're all a part of the Optimist Club. And so I thank you for it. I've been able to literally meet kings and folks, and yet the common touch is not lost on me, because we were a group of young people who felt that no matter what blessings we had gotten from on high, we have to reach to the next level. So we spent time at the Boys and Girls Optimist Club on Collingwood. We
Yes.
worked many of the, I don't know if you know this, but the Optimist Club came over several times and worked with the homeless as we fed them at our own church over at Ebenezer. And so it was just a great piece. And I think people were touched by our own sincerity. And now that our kids are in their 20s or so, or on their way, like
Yes.
your grandchildren,
Yes.
it is time for us to continue to give back and say, this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. So
There we go.
that's
All
it.
right. And it's so important to remember that, and remember what an impact you can have, even though at the time you don't even know the impact you're having.
Mhm.
You're just doing because you've had the need and feel the need to do and to give back and to help out. And you find out later that, oh, wow, people come to you and say, I remember when you did A, B, C, and D and the impact that had on me. And so it's just so important that we do those kinds of things just because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, when you're 20 years old, you think you know everything, and
Oh,
then when
yeah.
you sit at the foot of someone who's 40, you say, okay, maybe I didn't know that. And then when you're 40, you sit at the foot of those folks who are 60, and you say, you know what, I didn't know that either. And then when you get to be close to 60, you're still looking up at those people because those folks gave to you. And so I appreciate you, love you, all the cohorts of that your political peers that were there. They have all poured into me one way or another. And I
Yes.
enjoy it, so.
Yes. It was truly a labor of love. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I guess when we were doing it, we didn't know what we were really doing. We just wanted to help some young folk get on the move to the next level. And when we were recognized for starting the only young the only young Optimist Club in Detroit by the National Optimists, it was just really very, very special. So I just take my hat off to all you young people that were part of that and all the work you continue to do. Just really, really proud of you.
I love it too because you and others of your peers were pioneers. You all were trailblazers, breaking ground everywhere you went. And I can honestly say that I worked for. And I love saying this to people that people say, George, you're such a polished man. You're such a strong, powerful person. I said, well, that's because I worked for Alma G. Stallworth when she was in the State House. I worked for Alberta Tinsley Talabi when she was in the city council. And I learned to both humble myself and to also to know that my blessings come from all places and sizes and all sides of my life. And when you work with Christian folk, right, then you learn to sit and study just like everyone else did in the biblical days, and then you're measured, what's right, you have someone to be a check and balance to your life, and what you did in the Optimist Club was truly groundbreaking. And so I sit back and I look at Alicia Bell and I say, you know what, she's groundbreaking, right? Because I've seen her break that ground, and
Absolutely.
where does she get it from? She get it from her mama. She get it from her parents, from her family, and that's just what you have to kind of to realize is so critical that we pass things on to the next generation. So I just can't wait to see what your grandchildren gonna do.
I can't either. I can't either. And I count your daughter as one of my grandchildren, and she is doing wonderfully. I'm just so proud of her. She is just out there doing her things, just doing it. It's a wonderful thing to watch them, just to sit back and watch and smile.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
Yes,
indeed.
yes. Now, the other piece that George is, and we talked about the Detroit Salt Company. It's ironic we talked about salt after having the snow last week. They call it a snowstorm, but we live in Michigan. It was snow. It snows every year in Michigan. It wasn't a storm. It was just some snow. But I'm going to let them have that. But when it snows, we need salt. And where do we get salt? The Detroit Salt Company. So talk about the Detroit Salt Company, George. But in that vein, also the public safety and homeland security implications of what you do.
Not a problem. I think the first thing to kind of realize is that geologically speaking, Michigan is a basin. It's a bowl, right? It's a bowl, and if your listeners will viewers will take their right hand and kind of cup their hand, it's really like a small bowl, right? That is in the center, and in that bowl, this Michigan basin, some 300 to 400 million years ago, salt deposits were laid down. In the earth from seawater. At that time, this land that Michigan is was somewhere near the equator, right under salty water in the Atlantic, and so evaporation occurred, global warming occurred, and it left salt deposits, much like what you see at the Great Salt Lake or the Dead Sea in Israel. I like to tell little kids that the sun got hotter, evaporated the water, and the salt is its daughter, right?
Oh,
And it's true. The only place that you get salt is from seawater, and so it only matters if is the seawater current like the sea of like the Dead Sea in Israel or the Salt Lake City area, or is it an ancient sea? And what we have here in Detroit beneath us is an ancient sea that existed some 350, 400 million years ago. And so that salt is laid down here about 1,200 feet below the city of Detroit, and it extends all the way through the tip of your finger, which would be Mackinac, and over into Canada. So there's a great salt deposit that's here, and it has helped sustain life. People can't remember back this far, and neither you nor I am that old, but there was a time when people didn't have refrigerators, right? And some of your seasoned saints might remember that. And then before refrigerators, you had salt. You had to salt your meat. You had to pack it. You had to store it, and that's how people learned to survive. And so salt was excavated here in the around the turn of the last century, 1900, so that there was food preservation, and that's why salt was used at that time for that. And then it wasn't until, let's say, the 1940s, 1950s, after refrigerators were here and now finally automobiles were here, that the usage of them on the roads and highways became a thing, and that's kind of where we are today. So, but yeah, salt's been here since 1906 here in Detroit, and excavated from a mine that's 1,200 feet beneath Detroit. They call it the city beneath the city. And so,
wow.
mhm.
No, I know so many people just don't know that we've got a whole city beneath this wonderful city that we live in rather. Do you still give tours? Because I know at one time there were tours given of the city beneath the city.
And that's a no. There's no more tours of
No
that.
more tours.
Yeah, but because we fall under the mining regulations, and
Mhm.
that requires a more stringent standard of just who gets involved with our mine. But I will say this, that the idea of mining is a very critical piece. One of the more interesting things is that when someone says to you, no one ever asked the question, well, why is Detroit the home of the auto industry? Like, why did that even occur? Like, why didn't they pick Chicago or pick New York City, right?
Mhm.
Well, what made Detroit um, the home of the auto industry initially was because mining was the big part of our state. And so what happened is that the first state geologist, a guy by the name of Douglas Houghton, whom they named Houghton, Michigan after,
Wow.
he went through the state and figured out what raw materials were here. And so he looked on, went to the western shore, and he saw all this sand and all this gravel there. And they knew that they could make cement with that. They saw the big trees, and they saw the wonderful places that they could chop those down and build homes. He went to the UP and he found metals, copper and kind of interesting rock. And then he found in like places like uh, uh, in Bay City, Midland area, and also in Mount Clemens, this kind of water that was little bit more heavier than the fresh water. So he saw that the water in the lakes was fresh and clean and no salt. But these other places by Mount Clemens and by Dow Chemical area water was heavy, so there must be some salt underneath here, right? And so he figured out there was salt underneath there, and in the Springwells area, and that's how they found the salt. But in the same process, they found that there's other heavy metals in the UP, and so the heavy metals in the UP were shipped down the Detroit, down through the Great Lakes of the Detroit River down to Detroit. And Detroit at one point was the metalworking capital because it had all this iron, had all this copper. And so some of you may remember that Michigan, Detroit was known as the stove capital.
Yes, it was a big stove that used to sit down in front of Belle Isle, wasn't it?
Right. At one point it was in Belle Isle, then they moved it up there to the state fairgrounds.
Yes.
And that was because when the settlers were moving west, going to Oklahoma and Kansas, they'd stop in Detroit, and then they would get their stoves here. They'd get their metals, and they get their spoons and their pots and pans. And so that's because we had all this copper and materials from here. And so mining is essential. And that same metalworking piece became why Henry Ford was able to take his idea of a car and put it together, because they were metal tinkerings. And that's why Detroit is the auto industry of the world. It started all because of mining. And
wow.
And I'm proud to be able to talk about it because we are one of the original inhabitants of Detroit's industrial corridor.
Such history. Such history. I hope our listeners are listening to this. If you have any questions, you can send them in, and George will answer. But this is really such history for young people to know. How many schools do you go to, George, to talk about this? Because I'm sure it's not taught in schools. I just know it isn't.
Yeah, I get a chance to go a couple a year. It's so many things that we have going on here. But there's a nice little YouTube of me giving a presentation at the Science Center, and I try to also do things with college students and university students, so they understand this piece here as well. So,
so important. I interrupted you, but when you started talking about salt and not having refrigeration, it takes me back to a trip I went on to the wonderful nation of Nigeria in Africa. And this would have been back in 2004. And they still don't have refrigeration in many of the towns and cities outside of the major city. And that just really struck me that they have to go someplace every day to get food because they don't have refrigeration, and the lighting system wasn't very good, and the water system wasn't great. That to me is just unconscionable in this day and age.
Well, you have to have power. You have to have power to do that, and then energy and those infrastructure is always tough to do in certain places where you don't have a built environment to handle that. But that is, how America existed. My grandfather, God rest his soul, George Alexander, once said, I asked him what was the greatest invention that you remember in his lifetime, because he lived to be 99 years old.
Wow.
He said it was the refrigerator, because that changed everything. You didn't have to go hunting anymore. You could go find something. You could buy it at a store. It was already refrigerated. Then you could save it for a couple of days. And it changed the way people lived and existed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I remember, George, ice boxes.
Right.
And the Iceman. Right. Who would come by up down the street, and he'd holler out Iceman, and he'd take that big claw he had and build a cube of ice and bring it to you and put it in your refrigerator, and that's what kept your food fresh.
My grandfather was that person, and he
was an Iceman, really?
And he did it in Alabama when he was a young man. He used to ride up and down those hills and chop that ice off and pass it on to people, and people just don't realize how far we've come to have refrigerators. Look, people got freezers, refrigerators, these personal refrigerators in their little offices now.
Yes. Yes. It's such a different. it's a game changer, absolute game changer. Because we lived in the projects in Royal Oak Township, and we had ice boxes. And when we finally got a refrigerator that would plug in, that you didn't need to have ice, oh my, my, what a difference!
What a
Yes,
difference. Yeah.
yes.
Hmm.
Times change, but that history is so important that we continue to share that with people, particularly young people who sometimes take so much for granted.
Right.
And so they need to know the history of where we've come from,
Right.
so that they understand where we are and where they can take us.
That's right. There's so many things that are relevant. It's just a matter of where do things come from, and why do they exist.
Mhm.
When I talk about salt to people, I let people know that there's nothing that you own or have seen that doesn't have salt in it. You know, the clothes that you have on right now, the dye that's in the clothes that you have on has salt in it. The table that your computer is on has salt in it. The plastic that is of the computer that you're using has salt in it. If you
Wait a
didn't,
second, I didn't know all that, George. I knew some of it. I didn't know all that either.
if you didn't have salt in your body, you would die.
Yeah,
And
now
the
that I did.
and these are the questions of elements. And so, you know, science education is so important because it helps people to understand, you know, why we do what we do. Where do we get our raw materials, you know, from? Why is it that you have a taste for salty things, right? Was because your body's looking for it. Now you don't eat too much of it, you know.
That I was just going to go there to say that oftentimes they say, "Oh, no, too much salt is going to give you high blood pressure."
Right, but here's a neat fact, right? It's not the salt that you put on your food, right? Because you could never put enough salt on your food to actually ingest it, that your body wouldn't take it that way.
Mhm.
But the salt that's already in the food that preserves it is where all the salt is. And so if you buy fresher foods, you have less salt in it. You know, stuff that's frozen versus canned, you know,
Mhm.
that's the conversation piece you have. So you have to work it out and know that's kind of where you are. So yeah.
Wow, wow,
Hmm.
that's incredible. Tell us more about the salt company and what goes on in that city under the city.
Well, you just have people who mine, who go down every day. They actually excavate the rock salt using machines to dig that out. And it's a regular working piece. You know, we're working to meet the needs already of next year, you know,
Okay.
because that's how the demand is. And so
Mhm. Yeah.
that's how it goes. So
How far below the city is the other city, the salt mine?
so I say it's 1,200 feet. So I put it
Wow.
in the concept of like the Sears Tower going straight down.
Wow.
Yeah, that'd be about the right approximation. So
That's incredible. That is incredible. And now, where where is the salt company located in Detroit?
we're in the southwest part of the city, down near I-75 and Schaefer.
Okay.
Hmm.
I-75 in Schaefer. And the people who work there come in and they actually, I don't know, get in elevators to go down or drive down, or how do they get down?
It's called a skip in mining terms, and so it's a like a system that just kind of pulls up and down. Elevator is probably the best way to say it.
Mhm.
Most people will understand it, but it's really not just for um, uh, people. It's also for materials, and so it's a kind of a neat piece. But that's what we do. That's how they get down there. And they go down. They stay all day. Then they come back up at the end of their shift. So
Wow. Is it a
mhm.
24-hour shift operation?
Yeah, there's people working 24 hours there. Hmm.
Wow.
Yes,
That
indeed.
really is quite amazing.
Hmm.
Oh, and there's a question here, and I need to put my glasses on to see what it says. Let me do this.
Hmm.
It says, "Is it the salt that creates the potholes, or is it the weather in general?"
It's the weather in general.
It's the weather.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's a question: is salt and sodium the same thing?
Not quite similar, not the same. Sodium is a separate mineral, and it takes sodium and chloride together to make rock salt.
Oh, okay. My,
Hmm.
my, my. That's how many people work at the salt company?
About 100 or so. It's, we are always hiring, looking for people,
That's what I was
folks.
going to ask. Are there job opportunities?
Yeah, if there are people who are good with working with machines and working with their hands, there's always a, kind of a role there. So you can just go to our website, Detroit, www.detroitsalt.com, and there's a link there to put you right in for apply for jobs.
Okay. What kind of skills or background or experience or training do you have to work at this facility?
We like people who really can work with their hands, and then also who are, afraid of kind of general physical labor. But as to a background, if you happen to have worked well on cars or, you know, other mechanical stuff, that would be a good plus. But we'll train you, and that's kind of the
Oh.
issue. Yeah, because mining is its own thing. So,
Hmm.
mhm.
Is there an age requirement?
No, just 18 on up.
Oh,
Hmm.
excellent. High school graduate must you be, or what?
Nope.
No, just be able to pass the application test and so on,
Yeah, yeah.
and be physically able to do it is the biggest part, I'm thinking.
That's right. That's right. And I'd like to maybe talk about some of the safety matters too. There's lots of um, you know opportunities for uh, you know mining is a place that's regulated,
Yes.
through mining safety, and so we're one of the safest mines in the nation. I want to state that as a record piece, so that people can actually realize that there's a way for people to come in every day and go home every day, and that's very critical.
That's
Um,
important. That's
Very
right.
critical. Just like any other industrial facility, you have to have a moment of to pause and reflect and know that safety is first. The whole purpose of us is to do safe stuff. Our product goes on the roads so that people can drive in the wintertime and be safe.
Yes.
So we've been recognized that as such for a very long time, and I really think that's a great process here that people needed to know. So.
That's a plus. That's a
Hmm.
plus. But people can come to work in the morning and go home at night.
Hmm. Yes,
That's
indeed.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, we supply salt to just the Detroit metropolitan area, or do we supply it to other places?
Other places as well. We do that in a way that allows for persons to be to use different cities and municipalities choose this, and we are able to provide that. So we actually ship our product on the Great Lakes. We ship it on rail, and we truck it to places as well. So
Oh, so we ship salt all over the country then, and
yeah,
I suspect we ship some to Canada also.
no, we don't do that,
We
but
don't
it's
really.
they actually have their own mine in Windsor. So,
Okay, and
but
I
there's
would think though they would have access probably the same kind of situation we had, since they're right across the street, literally
yeah,
from
we're
us.
right. They're sister mine to us, and we do things with them, and it works very well. But the interesting thing, I'll say this to you from my history, is that how I even got involved in this was when I worked for Mayor Dennis Archer, because this actually restarted under his administration, and I was assigned to kind of help project manage what happened from the city's point of view, and so. As a part of my portfolio as a public safety professional, the issues around fires, floods, tornadoes, earthquakes. I've been trained through FEMA and other and the Michigan State Police, and this came to me as a part of that. And so, 20 years later, I'm still here,
Mm,
still in working away. I like to say to people that salt was a preservative. Come on, church. That was a beautiful thing.
yeah,
Which helped me to live and have a great time and doing things. So.
that's incredible. That's incredible. But when you bring up what happens with the safety part of it, talk about Homeland Security and your involvement you've had in that arena.
Well, I did say I was under the years of when 1999 or so. I was brought into the archery years that way in his administration, and if people can remember, we were very concerned about Y2K, at that
Yes, yes.
time.
Oh boy,
And
do I remember that.
there was a big thing. And so I was a part of that team. And then just behind that,
But let me, before you do that, tell people what Y2K is, because I'm sure there's some young folk who are listening and wondering what in the world is Y2K.
yeah, Y2K was a situation where, as we approached the year 2000, we realized that most of the clocks that we had that used and ran what they call systems, SCADA systems, or electronic things that measured time and have to run on a clock, were only set to go to the 1900s, not really to 2000 and
Yes.
beyond. And so there was a lot of upgrading of computer systems and things, and no one really knew all of where everything was. And so there was a concern that there would be
Mass
uh,
chaos. Everything was going to stop
chaos, things were going to
working.
stop working, traffic lights, and all of
Yes,
that.
I
And through a lot
remember.
of through what we call mitigation efforts, we were able to avert a lot of that, and it was able to we were able to ameliorate many of the impacts. In fact, the only thing that Y2K that really impacted the city of Detroit was the fact that the Cable Commission's scrolling sign went from 1999 to 1900. It didn't go to 2000.
Instead of 2000.
But it was a great exercise in figuring out
Mhm.
how computers and electronic systems run our day to day, and that was very critical at that time. Uh, Early at that time, I was certified in what they would call emergency management through the state police, and all of this would come to bear two times in 2000, the year 2000, which was we actually had a power outage. The city had a power outage, not
Mhm.
separately from that was when PLD or Public Lighting Department did most of the lights for the buildings, the traffic lights, the schools, Wayne State, the receiving hospital, and that grid failed. And then eventually we were able to restore that with the adding power from the Mustersky power plant. But that was all before the big power outage, which happened like
Yes.
2 years later, um, when everybody was out on the whole eastern seaboard. But it was a great exercise for us to know what happened. And then 9/11 happened, and
Yes.
I was on the watch then, and really a story that I've told a few people, but um, in August 2001, myself and another gentleman from the city of Detroit, Mr. Glenn Hendricks, he and
Mhm.
I were in Los Angeles to give a presentation at a conference on emergency preparedness. And we got up and talked about what we did in Detroit, and we had slides and all that. And then behind us was this group of guys from New York City.
Mhm.
And these were the guys who, a month later, were standing behind, at that time, Mayor Giuliani, responsible for the the issues of rebuilding the city, because they were the ones who had the emergency preparedness issues at that time. We actually sat there and watched them on TV and just couldn't believe that a month ago we were sitting at the table with them, and
Yeah,
you
that
know,
was such an incredible, incredible time. And just 3 months prior to that, I was in New York on a layover. We were going to an international women's conference in Greece.
mhm,
One of our friends who was with us had a daughter who lived in New York. And so we said, well, we'll just stop over overnight and stay with her daughter and enjoy her on our way to Greece. Well, that was in July.
mhm.
And we went to brunch at the World Trade Center.
Wow, isn't
They
that
had a
something?
wonderful soul brunch and they had entertainment. And we were in the World Trade Center 2 months prior to what happened on 9/11. And
Mhm.
we all just, when it happened, we were just all in complete shock that we had just been there.
Yeah,
You
and yeah,
never know.
you never know. In fact, the Emergency Operations Center for New York City was in the basement of the World Trade Center. So
Hmm.
literally, there was a collapse going on there, and my heart went out to those guys because I know what challenges that they faced for years on hand. And
Yes.
if I can put this into perspective about the World Trade Center collapse, the number of fire companies that the New York Fire Department lost that day would have eviscerated the entire Detroit Fire Department. They lost over 72 companies at that,
Wow.
and it was close, I think, to 90. And Detroit only has like 72 companies now, so they totally lost everything that we would have had here in Detroit in that one shot, and it was just a very serious thing. But it's been that was sort of the crucible in which I really found myself as a young professional and saying that, hey, I have to be a part of the people who work and to defend Detroit from such things because, my mother, sister live here, my daughter grew up here, you live here, your family, people that I know and love. And that was critical for us to know that we could actually find a way to make our places safe and secure for our families. And, I was glad to be a part of that. So,
Yeah, and we've been blessed to not have had any major incidences. Thank you, Lord. But and you just never know what God has in store for you because it's just it's mind-boggling to know that I was just in that World Trade Center 2 months before all of that happened. Uh, just incredible.
Well, there's a great network of folks between the police department, the FBI, the first responders, fire department, who work very closely. The Coast Guard, here in Detroit area works very hard. And I work with them currently now through the company to do what I can to keep things safe for our company as well as others here. It's just a very multi-layered approach to keeping the world safe and secure for democracy.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely. And I know that many times people don't know all of the intricacies and all the behind the scenes goings on
mhm.
that happen to keep us safe.
Right.
And we just take a lot of it for granted. But you just mentioned the Coast Guard, which is
Mhm.
something I'm sure people don't even think about.
Right.
But because we are on an international waterway, and I'm sure Detroiters don't even think of Canada and the Detroit River as being an international waterway.
Right. Well, especially since most of us grew up here and it wasn't an international waterway, it was just another place we hung out. We went
Exactly.
and shop and
Hop
had
in the car,
lunch.
go to Canada and for lunch or dinner, or can
Yeah.
come. And most people have never had that kind of experience or never had a chance to do those kinds of things. And
Hmm.
so we have taken so much of that for granted and so much for granted of our safety that's taken care of by all those folks along that riverfront that make sure that stuff just doesn't happen to us. Uh,
Right. Yeah, it's a different world, but and those there will maybe someday there'll be a day when we can open those borders like that again. But I remember having my homecoming dance in Canada, right from high school. Like
isn't
literally,
that something?
yeah, it was a different time and a different day. But Detroit's a great place, and the continued growth for the city starts with its safety. And
Absolutely.
and I know that our sheriff has worked hard for that here in Wayne County, and the previous sheriffs before him, the same thing, and our police chief in Detroit. And we've tried hard to find a way to protect and defend what is here and what is ours. So
Exactly. And I think it's important to note that the people that work so hard to do that, most of them are native Detroiters
oh yeah, that's right.
who have grown up here, who love this city, love the people in this city, and
Hmm.
would do whatever they can to make sure that we continue to be as safe as we can given the circumstances. So,
Hmm.
my hat goes off to you and all of those of you who work in that arena to kind of help us, and we don't even know we're being helped.
Yes.
We don't know all of what you're doing behind the scenes, but we appreciate it.
And speaking of behind the scenes, I'm going to have to jump off of this device and jump onto another because my power is about to go out.
But don't
Uh,
worry, because we're gonna just call it a close. Give me a closing statement. Tell
closing statement. Well, I
something
just
you
want
want
to
to say.
I just want to say to your listening audience that Jesus said that ye are the salt of the earth. And what is the salt if you lose its savor? It's really a thing that he gave to us a lot of precious minerals and materials for us to do things. Let us work together to build a place that is safe and secure for all of our families, and that our communities might grow. I say to people all the time that without salt, there is no community, no city, no civilization exists without it for its people. And so you must realize that wherever you are as a person, be as pure as the salt of the earth, because Jesus said that you are. And so I hope that your listeners and their loved ones are safe and secure in this winter season. And let's enjoy the sunshine and the light that comes from him all together.
Thank you so much, George. Oh, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much, listening audience. Mr. George Davis. Mr. George Davis. I'm not going to say from all those other places. I'm just going to say Mr. George Davis, one of my kids. I love
one
you.
of your kids. Yes,
Thank
indeed,
you
Mom.
so much for being here. And we're going to have you back later on in the year because that history lesson needs to be taught and said over and over and over again.
I love sharing and love caring and I love you. So thank you so much.
Have a great day.
We'll
see you next week, everybody. It's the Community Bell Show. See you next Monday, 4:00. Don't miss us. We'll have somebody else very special to give you information that you need to make yourself successful and to make your communities the best they can absolutely be. Thank you. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Community Bell with your host, former Wayne County Commissioner, Edna Bell. This broadcast was brought to you by WVTC Radio Detroit. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, our website, www.wvtcradio.com, or download our WVTC app from the Play Store for Android users and the App Store for iPhone users. If you've enjoyed this broadcast, tell a friend to tune in. We'll see you next Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern to the Community Bell Show, right here on WVTC Radio Detroit. You're listening to
We are WVTC Detroit. What it is, we're gospel music, preaching, teaching, inspiration, encouragement, news, and guest interviews. We are WVTC. We're winning victories through Christ. WVTC Detroit. All up in the community. That's who we are. What it is.
It's your girl, Crystal P, coming to you with More Than the Eyes Can See show on Saturday, March 25th, 2023 at 7 p.m. at the lovely Silver Gardens Event Center located at 23450 Southfield Road. You don't want to miss this show. It's comedy, it's music, and of course, a few surprises. And most of all, it gives back to Lupus Detroit. So all my Lupus warriors, I want to see you in the house. Got very special guests, Demetrius Neighbors. So you know we are about to bring it. Don't forget, More Than the Eyes Can See. You can call 248-820-5449 or head to eventbrite.com. Search for More Than the Eyes Can See.
You cannot hate on me, 'cause my mind is free. Feel my destiny, so shall it be.
Get your ticket.
Okay.
Pastors Jarrell and Deshaun Johnson of Empowering Disciples Church, 18250 Church Street, Roseville, Michigan, presents an awesome night of praise and worship featuring Minister Christopher Mark, along with special guests. It's going down March 31st, 7 p.m. Tickets are just $25, VIP $45. For more information, please call 586-773-2358 or purchase tickets on www.empoweringdc.org. Don't miss it.
You're listening to WVTC Gospel Radio Detroit, and we're flowing in the Spirit.